Do you know that nowadays some corporations in India have indirect influence over the government, politics, and the administration, and also over the institutions like the police and army? But long ago, one company had direct influence over the same government, politics, and the administration, and even they have raised their own army. The shocking part is it was a foreign private company. Yes, the British East Indian Company. So how did a group of merchants from the England become the masters of the top richest regions in the world at that time? Let's check it. To understand the rise of British East Indian Company, we need to go long back before the company had born. For centuries, Asia was far wealthier than Europe. India, China, and Southeast Asia produced goods that Europeans desperately wanted: silks, spices, porcelain, cotton textiles, indigo, tea, and precious luxury goods that traveled across vast trade networks. During the Middle Ages, most of these goods reached Europe by the merchants from the Islamic world. Arab, Persian, and Ottoman traders played a major role in controlling the routes between East and West. By the late 15th century, the Ottoman Empire dominated many of the overland connections between Europe and Asia. For European powers, that created a problem. Access to Asian wealth depended on routes they did not control. So they began searching for a direct sea route to the east. In 1497, the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama sailed around the Cape of Good Hope and reached Calicut on the Malabar coast of India. That voyage changed global history. For the first time, European powers had a direct maritime link to India and the Indian Ocean world. Portugal moved quickly. Over the following decades, it built forts, trading posts, and naval bases stretching from Africa to India and Southeast Asia. Spain was building a vast empire of its own in the Americas and beyond. Gold, silver, spices, and overseas trade were making these kingdoms immensely rich. England, by contrast, was not yet a great imperial power. It lacked the money and state capacity to launch giant overseas ventures on the scale of Portugal or Spain. But English merchants were watching carefully. They wanted a share of the wealth flowing from Asia, and that desire would give birth to one of the most consequential corporations in history. During the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, England witnessed the rise of great merchantmen, sailors, and bold adventurers like Sir Francis Drake, Sir Walter Raleigh, and Sir James Lancaster. Some raided Spanish ships, some explored new routes, some dreamed of commercial fortunes overseas. But long distance voyages was incredibly expensive and very dangerous. Ships could be destroyed by storms, disease, shipwreck, piracy, or war. If one expedition failed, a single merchant could lose everything. So England turned to the financial innovations that would change the world: the joint stock company. Instead of one person funding a voyage, many investors could pool their money into a single venture. If the expedition succeeded, they all shared their profits. If it failed, they shared the losses. Risk was spread, capital became easier to raise, and suddenly overseas trade became a business model. One early example was the Muscovy Company that was founded in 1555 for the trade with Russia. Inspired by that model, a group of London merchants approached Queen Elizabeth I in 1600. They wanted royal permission to form a company dedicated to trade with the East Indies. The Crown approved. On the last day of 1600, East India Company received its royal charter. It was granted exclusive rights to English trade in much of the Eastern world. What began as a commercial venture would, over the next 2.5 centuries, became something far more dangerous. At this stage, East India Company didn't have an empire, no Indian territories, no dream for ruling the subcontinent. It wanted only one thing above all of this: profit. Soon after receiving the royal charter, East Indian Company sent its first expedition to Asia. Under James Lancaster, company ships sailed toward Southeast Asia, hoping to break into the enormously profitable spice trade, and the spice trade was worth fighting for. In Europe, goods like cinnamon, cloves, pepper, nutmeg had sold for huge markups. These were not minor luxuries, they were some of the most valuable commodities in global commerce. Control the spice trade and you would become incredibly wealthy. But the British were late to the game. The Dutch East Indian Company, or VOC, was already deeply entrenched in Southeast Asia. It was richer, stronger, and far more aggressive. The Dutch had better networks, stronger fleets, and a more secure hold over the Spice Islands. The English tried to compete. They established outposts and negotiated where they could, but they simply could not match Dutch power in the region. Gradually, they lost ground and were pushed out of many of the most lucrative spice producing zones. The company even tried to establish itself in Japan. In 1613, Captain John Saris reached Hirado and opened an English trading post there. But once again, Dutch competition made the venture unprofitable. By 1623, the English abandoned the effort. The dream of dominating Southeast Asia was slipping away from the company, and it started to look elsewhere. And that elsewhere was India. The company's first contact with India was in 1608 when the ship Hector arrived at Surat on the western coast. The English had entered a land very different from the fragmented states they would later exploit. At this time, much of the subcontinent was ruled by the Mughal Empire, one of the most powerful and prosperous empires in the world. The English understood their position very quickly. They were not conquerors, but the supplicants. So they chose diplomacy. The company sent missions to the Mughal court in 1608 and again in 1615 for seeking permission to trade. Eventually, those efforts succeeded. In 1618, the East India Company established a major trading post at Surat, its first durable foothold in India. Because from the Surat onwards, the company was not longer a distant European venture that trying its luck in Asia. It was now a permanent presence inside the Indian subcontinent. And once it had one foothold, it began looking for more. Over the 17th century, the company started to expand its network over the Indian coastline. In 1639, it acquired land on the southeastern coast and established Madras. In 1661, the Bombay comes under the control of English by the marriage alliance between the England and the Portugal, and later it was transferred to the company. Then in 1690, the company established a major settlement at Calcutta in Bengal. By the end of the 17th century, English East Indian Company had created major three power centers in India, the Bombay, Calcutta and Madras. These were not just warehouses. They were fortified commercial bases, administrative hubs, and eventually the foundations of political power. But the trade was not only the dark business the company was involved in. It also participated in the East African slave trade, transporting enslaved people from places such as Mozambique and Madagascar to work in company settlements. Yet despite the growing wealth, the company still had its own limits. It was powerful for a merchant body, but it was not yet a ruler. It still depended on the goodwill, weakness, or distraction of Indian rulers to survive. Trade was only the beginning. In the next episode, we will see how the East Indian Company gained political power in India. Thank you.